So a couple months ago, just before Computex, I built a new test bed in a live video that included successful assembly of the Praxis Wetbench, and I will link that video in a card up in the top right. However, I couldn't tell you my actual intended CPU for this test bench, the 6950X, because it wasn't out yet. Also, I used a temporary motherboard because my intended motherboard for this test bench was the X99 Designaire EX from Gigabyte, and it didn't arrive quite in time. Also, as quite a few of you pointed out, this is the Praxis Wetbench, and I air-cooled the CPU. Just doesn't seem right. So, a bit of a rebuild is in order, and here are the parts I will be using. From the original build, I'll still be using the sweet-looking Praxis Wetbench in white and gray, and I'll carry over the G.Skill Trident Z 32GB DDR4 3200 quad-channel memory kit in black and white. The new parts that I'm adding, starting with the Gigabyte X99 Designaire EX motherboard, it's black, white, and blue, and it's got steel-reinforced slots, and it has a pair of U.2 ports and an M.2, and it's got a cool trick with the DisplayPort input that can accept your discrete GPU's video signal and pass it back out through a USB Type-C connector with Thunderbolt 3. Also, look, sexy sleeved SATA cables. Anyway, it's a perfect home for the Intel Core i7-6950X, the 10-core Extreme Edition broadwell-E CPU, which is as drool-worthy as it is overpriced. For my operating system, I'll be going with the Intel 750 series 400GB SSD. It's NVMe, reads and writes of 2200 and 900 megabytes per second, respectively, and I'll be using it with a U.2 adapter. The power supply is the Gigabyte Extreme Gaming 1200 watt PSU. I know nothing about this power supply other than that it's 80 plus platinum, and it got sent over along with the Gigabyte GTX 1060, which I tested in ultrawide in my last video, by the way, card up in the corner. But it's got all black cables, fully modular, and 1200 watts gives plenty of headroom for multi-card configurations. It's got pretty loud orange labels though, which doesn't really match my color scheme, but I don't think they'll show, fortunately. Wow, 100 amp 12 volt rail. And finally, to get this bench a little damp, we have the Fractal Kelvin S36, fulfilling my needs for a CPU liquid cooler and a 360mm radiator, copper by the way, to fill out the rad mount on the back of the Praxis Wetbench. So here's where I realized that the tubing on the Kelvin S36 was not going to be long enough to reach around and get up to the CPU socket. You're damn right I said reach around, by the way. So plan B was to remove the tubing from the pump temporarily, pass each tube through the motherboard tray, and then reconnect it, which should give enough slack. It worked, and I was able to top off the few drops that leaked out while I had the tubes opened up with the fill port on the side of the pump. There's no way this would have worked without the removable fittings on the Kelvin S36, and although one of my reconnects did pop out and I had to kind of scramble to mop up the juice that leaked, I was able to reattach it and got through the rest of the CPU cooler installation without any issues. Cable management was a little tricky since this is a very open design, but I used some Velcro straps to keep most everything tied up just beneath the motherboard. With the build all finished, Windows 10 installation proceeded, and I kept a close eye out for leaks, thankfully none so far. As for CPU temps, check out my 6950X benchmarks video, which is linked again in the card in the top right, and you will find that with a 4.3 GHz overclock, I was hitting 80C on this CPU with air cooling. But now, with water, I'm topped out at 60.